I want to start off
Thank
by
you.
asking you, what is the administration's logic behind these cuts? What are the agency's new priorities? Because they talk about wanting to end chronic health disease. Isn't healthy food a priority in that case?
Well, I think healthy food is definitely a priority for achieving that goal, but as all governments have competing priorities, and I think what the government is saying here is that in their pursuit of efficiency and reducing waste, it's necessary to reduce these programs.
And how are funding cuts already impacting the number of people and local charities that they can support?
Well, there are pretty significant implications of these cuts. There are implications for food banks, there are implications for local farmers, and of course for the communities that are benefiting from these programs. And so tens of millions of Americans will be impacted by these cuts.
And what kinds of food and produce will be hardest to replace without this sort of government support?
Well, so these are supplemental funds that add on to funding that the local school programs have, and they're really important at achieving some of those nutrition goals that you mentioned before, because the things that they tend to buy with these are fresh produce, protein, so things that are really important for healthy and nutritious meals for children. And they can also help to deliver local specialty products that you might not otherwise purchase if you were just buying on sort of the national distribution channels. And so you're missing out on those local opportunities as well as some of the most nutritious food.
So, sir, in your opinion, how detrimental are these cuts?
Well, they're pretty serious. They're leaving a really big gap for both the food banks and for children and those who are hungry. And the savings, of course, will are intended to go to reduce the cost of people in the grocery store. But we're achieving those reductions to the extent that there are out of the mouths of the hungriest people in America.
Yeah. Isn't it true then that food banks are already dealing with fewer supplies due to fewer donations as people find it hard to feed their own families with, interest rates so high and the cost of living so high? So how much of an added pressure is this then? And what can communities do to help?
Yeah, so there are people that are still struggling, coming off of COVID and the pandemic, and with high inflation, that's hitting families particularly hard. And so food banks are no different. And so there's even a greater demand, of course, for the communities to step up and help to fill this enormous funding gap. And so there are things that people can do. They could participate and provide donations if they're able to do that. Volunteer programs allow people to help with packaging and sorting food so that those are services that are desperately needed. And of course, being able to advocate with policymakers in order to try to potentially change some of these policies.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, it's not just those on the receiving end that are essentially affected. How are local farmers coping with losing at least what must be a sizable chunk of what I assume was a steady income source?
Yeah, so it's definitely having a big impact on local farmers. And some of those are smaller farmers because they're the ones that are making food available to the local community. And they're the least able to absorb these kinds of economic impacts. And they rely very heavily on these programs because they tend to be long-term programs. And without that, it's going to be hard for them to find alternative routes to market.
And what are lawmakers doing to try and restore or replace this lost funding?
So there are certainly concerns in both the House and the Senate, and we've seen statements from different the ranking member of the House on Ag Committee, Angie Craig, calling for a reversal of this. Senator Klobuchar has gotten a letter that she's pulling together with I think 25 other senators asking for these funds to be reinstated, and that's a bipartisan measure. And so there's definitely pressure being put on the administration to change some of these policies to avoid their impact on American consumers.
Is it enough pressure? Because what has the administration's response been to lawmakers? Do you think the White House reconsiders at any point?
So the response so far has really been focused on that efficiency and reducing waste, and that those are the priorities that they're putting forward right now. And so there certainly doesn't seem to be any indication of walking back these current policies at the moment.